On today's show, we discuss a hypothetical trade that might have some of you rolling your eyes, and we are going to discuss which defenseman Bill Zito could trade for, and Zito has a track record of taking care of his guys early. Which Panthers are the ones that Zito is going to take care of before their contract expires?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, June 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers, and as well on Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to everydayers who come here to get your daily Florida Panthers fix, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And you could listen to anywhere you listen to podcasts, but especially on YouTube, because we are less than 20 subscribers away from 500 subscribers. So I want to say thank you so much, everybody who support the show. And of course, like I say, for the everydayers, get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So Cats fans, of course, we discussed last episode about the rumor mill that is with Erik Karlsson, but based on just me going about my day through my day job and listening to national shows, this story is not going away. And I didn't really read this as a form of podcast, but we have a hypothetical trade to talk about when it comes to the Florida Panthers and Erik Karlsson. But it is a Winans Wednesday. So Jacob Winans is back here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And Jacob, it's been a week now since the Stanley Cup final ended. And first off, happy first day of summer to you, my friend.
Thank you. Happy summer to you as well. It's been a tough week, obviously, because we planned for there to be some Panthers games, and we had hoped that they would have pulled this series off. But we're like we said last week, it's a blessing to be able to cover this team this late into June, and our offseason is going to be relatively short. So we're going to look ahead, and sports never stop. The Marlins are on fire. I enjoyed a couple of U.S. soccer games on TV in the CONCACAF Nations League. So always something to watch as a sports fan, and we're going to do okay.
Yeah, and for me personally, I got to watch the U.S. Open this week, and I got to see Wyndham Clark win his first major championship. Has been on tour for the last 4 years and only got his first 2 wins in the last 2 months. So want to say congratulations to Wyndham Clark on getting his first major. He made $7.6 million in the last 2 months versus the last 3 years. He only made 2.3. So what a turnaround for
wow.
Career-wise for Wyndham Clark. But let's get to the hockey, my friend. Like I said, this Erik Karlsson story is not going to go away. Just like the Alex DeBrincat story is not going to go away for the Panthers as far as interest in him. Of course, for the Alex DeBrincat side, if the Panthers are going to trade for him, it's not going to be worth what Ottawa did gave up to get Alex DeBrincat in the first place in the draft last season. But as far as the Karlsson situation, there's a hypothetical trade that came out from Greg Wyshynski of ESPN on ESPN Plus, and his trade proposal for the Florida Panthers to try to find a way to get to Erik Karlsson was 2 different trades. A trade with the Edmonton Oilers that would send Brandon Montour to Edmonton for a 2024 first-round pick, and then Florida would do the following: trade that same 2024 first-round pick second round pick this year, which the Panthers have, and Eetu Luostarinen for Erik Karlsson. And that tweet of that hypothetical trade doesn't say anything about salary retained from the San Jose Sharks side. And looking at that, the facial expression that I had was kind of similar. It was like a puking sound, kind of like when SpongeBob ate Gary's snail food that one time. So that was my reaction when I saw that trade proposal as far as a hypothetical. What was your reaction when you saw that?
I hated everything about it. I can't really think of a better way to explain it. I really hate it. I think top to bottom we're getting hosed in that trade. With Brandon Montour being sent to Edmonton, I feel like for a first round pick, it's not really his value after the season he just had. You could get a whole lot more than a first round pick for him, and then to just turn around and flip that pick to San Jose and get Erik Karlsson, who absolutely had a record breaking year. But he's also 33 years old. He also makes roughly 4 times Brandon Montour's salary. And he's also under contract for 4 more years with a very, very lengthy injury history. I don't really see the sense in it. And also, that would essentially kill $8 million of cap space for this season coming up, which the Panthers really cannot afford to burn, because Montour's contract is at $3 million, roughly $3 million, I believe, for this season coming up, and Erik Karlsson's deal is currently over $11 million. Whatever extension Brandon Montour gets would not kick in this season. So the Panthers would be burning $8 million with an upgrade to Erik Karlsson. And then if you even wanted to consider some sort of Brandon Montour for Erik Karlsson swap, even if there is a third party involved, throwing in Eetu Luostarinen doesn't really make any sense to me, because he really had a breakout year, and he's shown that there's really, really high upside to his game, more than we thought there was. He's not – I really don't think he's a career bottom 6 player. I think he's a guy who can crack a top 6. At worst, he's a very high-end third liner. I really don't agree with the idea that we give him up and Brandon Montour to bring back a player in Erik Karlsson who offensively was fantastic, but his offense is roughly what Brandon Montour and Eetu provided points-wise combined for half the price. So I don't see the sense in a move like that. I hope Bill Zito doesn't see the sense in a move like that. And I think if that were the case, I think you'd have a really upset fan base, and understandably so. And the last thing we need to do now is make moves to rattle this core after what they just did. They've earned the right to run it back, and bring upgrades along the way. So I really don't see that trade happening. But like you said, this storyline's not going anywhere. This is the cost of being a contender. Players want to play for your team, and the rumors are always going to be flying around your team when you're a contender and a serious threat to win a Stanley Cup. There's always going to be rumors and buzz and players that are rumored to want to come there, and that's just the nature of the business. So it's a good position to be in, where we're a destination, but you don't like seeing those kind of trade scenarios where it doesn't work out in your favor, because I think that would be a big setback for the Panthers long term if that's what they ended up doing. The only wild card really with Brandon Montour, though, I want to throw it back to you on this. Do you think there's anything to his injury status with the shoulder? Do you think there's any kind of long-term concern there when it comes to extending him? Is that something that you could see being a factor in whatever decision they make?
Absolutely. I think that they it's definitely something that could hold it back from a possible extension, and possibly wait until the trade deadline next year to try to do something as well. And Brandon Montour might want a good amount more, and Zito might say, hey, we don't know how you're going to be after this, and to put big money on it, it's just a big risk. And Frank Cervelli also tweeted about Brandon Montour being out for possibly the beginning of the season as well, even though Paul Maurice never confirmed it himself in the end of season presser as well. So that's something to definitely look at with the torn labrum that Brandon Montour definitely has. So it's just it's just a very fluid situation when it comes to the decor. And also, Bill Zito was very stressed when it came to how tight the cap was this year. It was very obvious. He doesn't need to tell us in front of cameras. We were even feeling it as people who watch this team and cover this team as well. And to do that while by facilitating an Erik Karlsson trade, you don't want to be in that position again. Definitely not. You definitely don't want to be there as well. So it's a no-go for me making that trade for sure. But there are some defensemen that the Panthers could bring in. We spoke about two other defensemen yesterday on who they could bring in, but there are a few other names that I would like to discuss with you, Jacob, in segment number 2 here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We're going to discuss that next here. But first, we're going to tell you all about FanDuel. And baseball season's in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers getting no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. Don't miss your chance to snag a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Segment number 2 here on this Wednesday, June 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob Winans is here for our first official offseason edition of Winans Wednesday. So, Jacob, there are a few players out there who are, I think if you are going to make upgrades to this team, I mean, it's spoken about all throughout multiple national shows about how this free agent class isn't the strongest when it comes to especially defensemen. And I think that if the Panthers are going to bring some pieces over, of course, there's 2 spots on the defense that are missing right now for this team. Part of me thinks that you're going to have to do it via trade. And of course, we've said what we've had to say about Erik Karlsson. Nothing against the player, just the cap hit when it comes to him. But a few players who are in situations of contract status that that are not solved by the current teams they're on. One of them is Brett Pesce of the Carolina Hurricanes. Plays a second pairing role over there, 6'3", 206. But the cost of him might be a little too much. From what I'm hearing. Noah Hannafin of the Calgary Flames is one as well. He was part of the Adam Fox, Dougie Hamilton trade that sent him from Carolina over to Calgary in that trade. Here's one as well, Jacob. That was actually written in a collab article by David Dork and David Prognata of the Fourth Period. Joel Edmondson, a third pair guy who has Stanley Cup experience. Which is huge when you think about possibly bringing someone in who plays big minutes. And Kent Hughes wanted a first-round pick at the deadline for Edmondson, but didn't get one. So he might have lost a little bit of leverage, which might be good news for the Panthers, and they've done a trade before. And the other one, and this is only because I've heard this recently based on Elliot Friedman, Ethan Bear might not get a qualifying offer from the Vancouver Canucks. And he's young, 25 years old. He did finish the season on LTIR this season for Vancouver. But out of these names as players to possibly sign or trade for, who are the ones that stick out to you?
Yeah. So to address the free agency class and trade rumors, this is no reason to panic for the Panthers. And I want to stress that because Where some teams may be looking at this free agent class as, oh my gosh, there's not really anything available. We have to go make a big trade if we're going to upgrade this summer. There are teams that are really in that position. The Panthers are not in that position. The Panthers are, all they need are holes to fill and some minor tweaks and things like that. The Panthers aren't looking for, are not necessarily in need of a huge game-changing superstar, a big money free agent. That's not what we're in the market for. The Panthers are in the market for depth and filling holes, which advantage Panthers if you're looking at this free agency and this trade season coming up this summer, because they don't have the pressure to go make a giant blockbuster move. With that said, Joel Edmondson is a guy I really do like. I think he's a very similar player to a little bit of a younger Mark Stahl if you look at his game. Left side defenseman, really big guy. Maybe not the fastest skater, but really, really sound positionally. Throws the body around. Really good stay-at-home defense partner for a guy. If you look at Brandon Montour, who's going to need a new defense partner this year coming up, assuming Mark Stahl is not brought back, which I don't think he will be. Brandon Montour is going to need a new partner, and Edmondson would fit the bill. Ethan Bear is a name that I really find interesting. A little bit more of an offensive defenseman, not the biggest guy, but I really liked his game in Edmonton when he was with the Oilers. I think he was a really, really good young defenseman there. His development kind of sort of tapered off with injuries, and there was the whole his time in Edmonton really didn't end well, with just a couple of little playoff mistakes, but it turned into a lot worse situation outside of hockey, where there was some pretty serious racism involved and some things like that no player should ever have to deal with. But I think if he were to come to Florida, he would be here at probably less than what his talent is worth money wise. I think he's a guy who really fits the bill of the type of guys Bill Zito brings in. Someone who's really high upside, either had injuries or other circumstances that kind of delayed development. You get him at a discount, you bring him in, and he could reach his full potential here in an organization that does a really good job of letting these guys develop and flourish in the right system. So I think Ethan Bear is absolutely the type of player I would want to see brought in, and he plays the right side. So that would raise questions about Radko Gudas' future. But Ethan Bear is 100% a player that I would consider, especially given his age and his upside at only 25 years old. He would really fit in well age-wise with the cup window we have here. And if you bring him in at a discount and his game really hits and really takes off, you've got another steal, potentially a Josh Mahura, Gustav Forsling situation where you bring a guy in who's looking for a home and he really blossoms. So those are definitely a couple of pieces that I would keep an eye on through trades. Brett Pesce, I think, probably a little bit too high of a price tag on him. And again, you have to be really careful trading for someone like Pesce, because Carolina is a team we're going to run into again in the playoffs. In my opinion, if we're going to win a Stanley Cup, that's a team you're going to have to get through anytime you're going to get through the Eastern Conference. And if you trade too much to get Pesce, whatever you traded to the Hurricanes, you're going to have to play against that package. And I really don't love the idea of giving up a high-end prospect and a really good young roster player, someone like Etu and possibly a good defenseman. I don't love the idea of having to run into that in the playoffs. So it's a no for me on Pesce. Hannafin's interesting. We'll see what his price tag looks like. But another big left side defenseman, I think he'd fit in well here. Calgary's probably not eager to get fleeced in a trade by Bill Zito. It doesn't look so great that they gave up Matt Tkachuk. Exactly. And Sam Bennett, going back to that one, I think they'll be very cautious dealing with Bill Zito, even though it is not the same general manager now. But those are some interesting targets. And then free agency wise, there's definitely some names out there that I really like. Carson Soucy, Ryan Graves. There's definitely some guys out there that are interesting to me as potential free agent targets as well. So the defense is going to look different. It is definitely going to look different. And hopefully it looks a lot better and not just the players on the ice, but the cap situation. And I think we're in a good position to make some key upgrades to some of those holes on the blue line.
And I like what you said about how the Panthers don't need to be super desperate in order to fill the holes as well. And one thing about Joel Edmondson is he can play on both sides as well. That's one thing. And Brandon Montour is also that way as well, as far as someone who could play on both sides of the defense. So a lot of interchanging pieces, especially if Brandon Montour is expected to miss time here as well. And a good question to ask with a third pair is, are you comfortable with having a very young third pair in Ethan Bear and Josh Mahura there as well? That's something to definitely consider. But as far as our expectations, I know they made a Cinderella run to the Cup, but my expectations as of right this second isn't just go back to the Stanley Cup. It's hard to do. And when you look at teams on paper, that all the teams that the Panthers faced against, the other team was the better team on paper. But there might be an opportunity for the Panthers to be that better team on paper, but to start back from square one as well, and even to get these pieces there, as far as the complementary, it's gonna be a tough task to do. So I'm not like right away. Your expectation is to be right back at the Stanley Cup final. My expectation is playoffs, obviously, but it's not just. It's just when you talk about the grind of a playoff round, I just can't put myself there.
I agree, and I said this the entire playoff run. It was very much it really enjoy that because you don't know when you're going to be back. The opportunities they don't come as easily as they may look. Even if the Panthers do make it back to the Stanley Cup final next year or the years following that, the likelihood of obviously the first round, it's a 7-game series, it takes a lot out of you, but the likelihood of going 4-1, 4-0 the next 2 rounds, going 8-1 between 2 rounds, that just doesn't really happen usually. So it looked a lot easier for the Panthers than it really is this season, and it takes a ton of lucky breaks. It takes a lot of good bounces. It takes a lot of good luck in the health department with injuries. And the Panthers, they, for the most part, until the very end, stayed relatively healthy. Were able to get through that playoff run with a decent bill of health. So there's so many factors that go into it, and hockey is a really interesting sport when it comes to playoff runs because, like you said, you don't just automatically expect to get back. Where in basketball, for example, if you put together a super team of talent, you almost know like this is a team that's going to get back. In hockey, it really doesn't function that way, and all you can do is put a roster on the ice that has a chance. And the Panthers are going to put another team together next year that has another chance. And however far they go with that is how far they go with it. But all you can do is put as many consecutive rosters in a row that that get into the playoffs and have a chance to make a run. And you let the chips fall where they may once you do that. And I think the Panthers are in a good position to put another roster on the ice next season that's going to get to the playoffs, and they're going to have a chance to make a deep run. And we'll see how far it goes. But it's a multi-year project. It's not a Stanley Cup or bust type season. This is a team that's going to have multiple cracks at it, hopefully, and you just got to find the 1 year where you're able to break through. And it could be next year, it could be in the next 5 years, but the process, we're in it now. The Cup window is open.
Mm-hmm. And yep, with 16 players returning next season, you definitely got a chance for sure next year as well. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3. We're going to discuss some of the RFAs for the Panthers this year and the ones who are going to be RFAs next year and who we can see get an offer or extended a year before they hit RFA status. We're going to discuss that next year on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Segment number 3 here on this Wednesday, June 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you guys as well for coming back here for another edition of Winans Wednesday. Jacob Winans is once again here. And Jacob, we're going to talk some RFAs for the Panthers as far as the ones this year and coming up for the Panthers next year. But let's start with some of the guys who are going to be RFAs this year for the Panthers. And a year ago, around this time, we were wondering about how a Spencer Knight contract would look like. But thankfully, the Panthers took care of him a year in advance. And, you know, as you could see with the title of the episode, Bill Zito likes to take care of his guys early, just like Alexander Barkov before he hit UFA status. But we're talking RFAs here. But there's a few RFAs who are up this year, and a few of them are defensemen who have been in the system for a while and just haven't been able to crack the Florida Panthers lineup. Max Gildon has been here since 2017, has had a few chances, has also had a few stints in Bakersfield, actually 2 stints. There's no attachment for Bill Zito with Max Gildon as far as him being a product of Dale Talon's regime as well. John Ludwig, still very young, 22 years old, but he specifically has a big injury history during his AHL career, and it's going to be hard to do you qualify an offer for him as a guy who's had a few unlucky breaks? That's a question to ask. Alexei Heponiemi is one. A career year in Charlotte and averaged a point per game in the Calder Cup playoffs. And the team that the Charlotte Checkers got eliminated by the Hershey Bears, they're actually playing Game 7 against the Coachella Valley Firebirds. I believe that's tonight, if I'm not mistaken. I got to double check. But a great playoff for him and a career high. Grigory Denisenko struggled in Charlotte this year, played a bottom role for them as well. He did play, of course, in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final due to an emergency basis, but I think the only reason Grigory Denisenko is probably going to get an offer because of draft stock, where he was drafted. They're gonna see him as untapped potential, but we've seen plenty of games of Grigory Denisenko. Of course, he's a big body, can hit, but he's struggled at the minor league level too. So that's a contract that of course you do, but you kind of I have no expectations as well for Grigory Denisenko as well at this point in his NHL career. How do you view the guys who are up for contracts this year as far as the ones named?
Yeah, so for this year's group, and there's a couple RFAs on the main roster who are due for contract as well, and Givani Smith, Colin White. So I'll start with those two. I think Givani Smith and Colin White have both probably played their last games as Panthers. Mm-hmm. Colin White, a guy who you really take a crack at signing him because he had some untapped potential in Ottawa. I don't think he really was the greatest fit. And started the season on the third line. They were great defensively to start, really struggled to score. And then he ends up at the end of the year on the fourth line in a line that really, really struggled throughout the entire playoffs. The Panthers won a lot of games basically on the strength of their top 3 lines. The fourth line was mostly a liability. So I think Givani Smith, Colin White, they've probably played their last games as Panthers. The names you mentioned, I think Grigory Denisenko, he's going to be brought back. He's a former first-round pick. There's some untapped potential there for sure. He's had some injury issues. Anytime a guy misses that kind of time that he missed with a broken kneecap, there's going to be some setback in development. And then also you have to remember he also was a victim of really the COVID year in the AHL where he had to play on a roster that wasn't really his. He played in Syracuse. in a shortened season. So he's really a year and a half behind development wise, which is tough to overcome. But he's still only 22 years old. There's still some untapped potential. But if we're expecting him to live up to where he was drafted, it's probably really not going to happen. I just don't think you give him away for free at this point. He's still a first-round pick. There's still some potential there. And he honestly, he's looked good at times, even in Florida. The knock on him is not the skill, the talent, the effort. His effort is always there. He's a very high motor player. It's just the production, points-wise. Sometimes he does everything right. He just can't seem to score a goal. He's still looking for his first NHL goal. He's hit the post about 4 or 5 times. So I think he'll get another year. He's going to have to prove himself, and if he could dominate at the AHL level, then maybe he extends his time. Alexei Heponiemi, really think he'll be brought back. No reason to give him up, honestly. I don't think he's going to be an NHL regular anytime soon, but good insurance policy to have. You can slide him in anywhere in the lineup. A couple other guys. I know Sarah Noel, his contract is up. He's an RFA. I don't think he'll be brought back. Unfortunate because he's a former second-round pick. Had really high upside, but injuries took their bite out of him as well. I believe Logan Hutsko is an RFA. I would expect to see him back.
He's only 1 year in the system, so that's
I would expect to see Logan Hutsko back for sure. And then on defense, Max Gildon, probably not. Not someone that Bill Zito has any ties to. And John Ludwig, he's kind of a wild card, but I think he'll get 1 more year given his injury history, and he's 22 years old. He's still young enough where you give him another year to see if he can crack the lineup. But at the minor league level, that defense is going to be tough to crack because there's a lot of guys that are on ELCs that are going to get priority playing time developmentally.
Santtu Kinunen's one.
He played really, really well this season. Played really well. We expect Mike Benning will probably start the year in Charlotte. He's going to be prioritized. Who else is there? I believe Evan Naus is. Yeah, I believe Evan Naus is coming to the AHL level this season. He's going to get playing Memorial time. Cup. He did, and he's a big body. He's going to be really important developmentally. So there's some guys that are going to make it tough for any of our RFA defensemen to really compete for playing time. But if they do keep one, it'll be Ludwig, not Gildon. Yeah,
and there's also a few in big name. I guess big name. Highlighted RFAs for next year who could possibly be extended right before at the start of free agency. 3 of them are Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, and Josh Mahura. Josh Mahura's extension came really in the middle of the season. They liked what they saw out of him, but the chance of it happening again mid-season, probably a wait and see kind of project for Josh Mahura. Anton Lundell, this one's interesting. Does Bill Zito look at his production in the playoffs after struggling in his sophomore season and say, "Oh, maybe this is an opportunity for us to get him at a low cap hit that he won't say no to now, so that they can where they project him to be, that value of the AAV will be good on the Panthers side of things, and they could get ahead of they don't have to get behind the 8 ball there." So Anton Lundell's interesting as far as the guy who could get extended very soon. And Eetu Luostarinen, of course, not a Bill Zito trade that he made, but his as Paul Maurice said right at the beginning of training camp, he's a top 9 player and has proven it as far as playing multiple spots, and of course with injuries has been able to fill in from time to time. That's another candidate for an extension. I say Mahura is a definite no for as far as an extension for now, but could change later down the line. But I think they could try to pull the trigger on an Anton Lundell extension very soon.
I agree. And with Josh Mahura, I'll start with him. I don't think that is in any way saying he won't be a Panther long term.
I agree.
I do think he's going to spend multiple years with the Panthers, unless he's a part of a much bigger trade down the line somewhere. But I do think he's going to be a cost-controlled part of the Panthers' blue line for at least a couple of years. And so I don't think there's any pressure to extend him right now. None. Now with Anton Lundell, his contract situation, like you said, is very interesting because a lot of young guys around his age group with decent production are getting long-term deals already. No bridge deals. They're getting like 7-8 year extensions. I don't think Anton Lundell is a guy you pull a trigger on a 7-year extension for. But I do think you have to consider he's going to get a sizable raise. It's just a matter of where you place that cap hit. And the way this usually works is if you want to get him for more years, the cap hit is slightly higher. So if you're going to get Anton Lundell on, say, a 3 or 4 year bridge deal extension, the cap hit it's not going to be low. I would assume it'd be somewhere around the $4 million range for 3-4 years. $4 million per year, if I had to guess. And for me, with Anton Lundell, I would try to get that done ASAP because I think he's really, really poised for a breakout season. And if he does have a breakout season, now you're talking long-term deal, higher AAV. I don't think
can down the road.
Exactly. So I think you get it done now. He's coming off a down year. Not to take advantage of him or anything, but a bridge deal. We're going to take care of you now, give you the time to develop. You don't have to worry about a contract for the next couple of years. Just develop, and we'll see where we land later on when it's time to extend long term. So I think Anton Lundell, you have to prioritize that, get that done ASAP. And then with Etu, that's another kind of tricky one because for me, Etu really showed me a lot of upside I didn't realize he had offensively. And I think realistically, I could really see Etu becoming a 20 goal, 25 assist player on a year-to-year basis. I could really see him slotting in with 45 points per season in a middle six role. And I think that upside is there for him. So I think if you can extend him right now, you do it. And that AAV probably shouldn't be too astronomical. At least double what he makes right now.
No more than 3.
Yeah, he'd definitely be around that $3 million range per year, about double what he makes right now. But I think that's perfectly reasonable for what Etu provides. So if you can do that, get it done. But I think you prioritize that behind Anton Lundell. I think Lundell comes first.
Yeah, no doubt. He's a homegrown player, and the attachment of Bill Zito's very first draft pick. So
first draft pick.
Like that means something to him for sure. So
I still believe in Baby Barkov. He's got elite potential.
No doubt. And he's definitely proven that over the postseason. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where we talked about hypothetical trades, possible defensemen that could be in a Florida Panthers sweater, and of course our RFAs this coming off season and next. But let the people know where they can follow you online.
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8. We'll definitely be active there throughout the off season and leading into next season. We've got some excitement coming in these next couple of weeks. Draft and free agency right around the corner.
No doubt. It's going to be a fun one. So thank you so much, Jacob. See you next week.
Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And every day, make sure you come back for Friday's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.